Here's what the Supreme Court told us in evaluating what type of arrest it is. What's the severity of the crime? What kind of crime has this person committed? Low-level crimes aren't going to be high-level injuries. We're not going to end up with somebody who's got lifelong injuries when he's doing a low-level crime. As crimes go up and become more assaultive, then those injuries could increase as well. Did the suspect pose a threat to an officer or to somebody else? If there's a threat there that potentially could hurt the police officer, then the severity of the use of force can also go up at that point. And did the suspect attempt to flee or resist any type of arrest? If there's resistance there, then we know that it becomes dangerous and it may leave a controlled type of arrest and move into a defense type of an arrest. This is what the courts told us about how a police officer will be judged anytime he uses force. The first thing is we're going to compare it to another objective officer. And the situation has to be judged based on the information that the officer knew at that exact time. We can't armchair quarterback and sit in our office and watch the video 15 times and then say, well, you should have known this or you should have known that. We have to base his decision on, or judge his decision based on what he knew at that exact moment in time when he used that type of force. So you can't use 20/20 hindsight, and we have to stand in his shoes and again, compare it to the reasonableness. Some of the reasons that you're going to escalate in force, and we're going to see, and this will hopefully pull together whenever we watch the video here in a minute, and I'll point out some of these things. But here's some of the things that the courts have told us you automatically can it's a necessity to elevate or escalate the amount of force that you've used. You tried one technique and it didn't work. Let's say I talk to a person and I tell the person to sit down and they don't comply, they don't sit down. That was a low-level use of force, verbalization. So now maybe I have to put my hands on them and physically try and make them sit down. That's a higher degree of force. So I've used one technique and it didn't work, so the courts have said you're naturally going to be able to escalate to a higher degree of force. Or if it's apparent that a lower level of force wouldn't work. And here's one that we'd like to talk about. It's like a knife. If somebody comes out of a car with a knife and I'm in close proximity to them, would the courts expect me to disarm that person with that knife? Well, if I did and I was successful, then that's a good thing. But if I don't and I'm not successful, then death could be there or serious injury. So if it's apparent that it may not work, I don't have to use a lower level of force. And it would expose me or anybody else into danger. The courts later on, after the Graham versus Connor decision, other courts have also added to the principles of necessity, things that we can look at when determining whether or not the amount of force that a trooper uses is reasonable. Here are some of the other things that you can look at. If we're dealing with more than one person, if we've got multiple people that we're dealing with, then it's going to be a higher degree of force. If the person's a lot bigger than us, as people are bigger, they're stronger, that's something that the courts have said is going to make it to where you can elevate or escalate your amount of force. If there's indications of drug use, of course, even in the highway patrol, we've lost our own troopers due to people who've been on drugs, and when it turns into a fight, it turns into a really bad situation. So the courts even recognize that drug use, pre-existing knowledge, if I've already dealt with this person before and I know that they have a tendency to be violent, or if there's available weapons around. And there's several other factors that can come into play that would be a reason that we would escalate or elevate the amount of force that we're going to use. But keep these in mind as we go through the rest of this. Just a real quick, this is kind of a recap. Number one, we want to make sure the arrest is legal. It's got to be a legal, lawful arrest in order to use force. Am I using the force for defense or control? What type of an arrest is it? And we're going to look at the type of injuries that are there and balance them with the type of arrest it is. So what kind of resistance am I encountering? The propensity for pain and injury of a technique, we always rank those things. We want to know what type of injury, the technique the person is using against the law enforcement, as well as the technique that law enforcement is using to gain control of the individual. And would a lower level technique work without putting me in danger? That's a question that we can always look at. Here's what Oklahoma state law is real specific about whenever it comes to excessive use of force. Once you've gained control of this person, once you've handcuffed them, you've gotten them under control, they're no longer a threat of hurting the officer, they're no longer a threat of escape. And just because they're handcuffed, of course, we've seen people do things to police officers, even though they're handcuffed, by kicking and spitting and things like that, that they can still be assaultive. But once we've gained total control of them, then the force de-escalates. We don't continue. And I think everybody has seen, you know, with videos that are out there, we've seen excessive force being used. When, you know, a police officer arrests somebody and then they're under control and they continue hitting them, striking them. You can go on YouTube and watch videos of those types of things that have occurred out there. So that's a definite violation of the law whenever you've gained control of somebody and you continue using force. And that's what Title 22, our Oklahoma statute, says, is that when force continues after the person has been rendered capable of no further resistance and not of escape, and force continues, then you're guilty of violating in the federal standpoint, you'd be guilty of violating their civil rights, and you're guilty of violating state law of excessive force at that point. So we're going to not do any questions right now. What I'm going to do is play this video. What I think I'm going to do is play it all the way through one time, and then we'll go back and kind of hit on it real quick. It's about 2 minutes in length. Like the captain said, and I'll point this out to you. This car, the video camera that we're looking out of, is Trooper Martin's video. This is Trooper Allen's car. The vehicle that he stopped for running the stop sign is directly in front of his car. And it'll kind of clear up as you get here. There's a fence. Here's the situation that we have. Trooper Allen initiated a traffic stop. One thing that we deal with in law enforcement, anytime we make a traffic stop, we want to be tactical about where we make the stop in places that there's light traffic, that there's not people around. We want to do it in a safe situation. There's 2 places where police officers get killed on a daily basis, and that's it. Arriving at somebody's house for a domestic and making a traffic stop. That's the 2 most dangerous places for any police officer around the country. So whenever we make a traffic stop, we want to do it in a safe location, but we're kind of at the mercy of the driver of the car that we're stopping. If they fail to stop or they go where they want to go before they stop, we're kind of at their mercy. That's kind of the situation we're in here. The driver of the car that Trooper Allen was stopping pulled up into this yard. He's a ways off the street. He pulled up into this yard. There's a fence here. I don't know what the distance here, maybe 10, 15 foot between. And this is a house that's having some remodel work done. So anyway, that's the setup. That's the situation. At this point, Trooper Allen has already gotten the driver of the vehicle that he stopped. He's already gotten that driver out of the car. He's talking to him. As a matter of fact, I believe he's bringing his hands behind his back, and we'll see here in just a minute. And Trooper Martin has just pulled up. His camera came on whenever he activated his lights. So as he activates his lights, he's now walking up on the scene. So we'll play it and then talk about it.
Did we go get that Bronco? Why? You live here?
No, I'm helping him on his house.
Oh, yeah?
Yes, sir.
Can I help you, sir? Okay. Why you stand over there for me for a minute? No, sir. Why don't you please go over there until we get down here? We'll be down here in just a second.
I'm going right there inside the damn house.
Sir? No, there ain't no reason to be like that, is there? Why don't you please just walk back over there in that street and you'll be all right. All right?
Hey, can I come over there? I'm going right there.
Wait,
That's what it is.
what I'm asking you to do is go back over there. Now, you going to be held?
What do you tell you to do? What do you tell you to do?
All right. We're going to do this the easy way or the hard way? The chance like that.